Welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by Reality Sports Online. I'm your host, Scott Bogman, and I am joined by Pat Fitzmaurice. You can follow him on the Twitter at FitzFF. And today we're going to have Jamey Eisenberg from CBS on to talk about 5 buy low candidates in Dynasty that you can get right now on the cheap before the draft. But before we dive into this content, I got to let you guys know about some giveaways that we have going on. We have a giveaway for a DK Metcalf autographed jersey we're doing right now. Will S. from Maryland was the winner of that Javonte Williams one last month. So congrats. All you need to do to get in on this is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. Take a screenshot, submit it to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. That's fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. And you are entered in to win. Do it as soon as possible because this contest ends at the end of April. We got a lot of stuff going on. Draft is coming up next week. So make sure you get it done before then. Also, I got to tell you that today's show is powered by our Dynasty Trade Value Chart over at fantasypros.com/chart. All of us analysts here at Fantasy Pros collaborate to make this Dynasty Trade Value Chart possible. The values for all your players, rookie draft picks in both single QB and Superflex leagues are in there. They're updated every single week. Check it out at fantasypros.com/chart. Mr. Eisenberg, how is the quote-unquote off-season treating you? And, I mean, are you ready for the draft? I feel like it's, 3 weeks away, and it's like 9 days away right now.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. It's fun to be here. The offseason has been, certainly interesting. I was actually having a conversation with my 9-year-old son. He said, "Is this the craziest offseason you've ever had?" And I said, "Probably so." I think, a lot of us, I'm sure, feel the same way. It's been exciting. Certainly a lot of content for us. I'm sure for you guys as well. And yes, the draft is going to be a very interesting one, very, very loaded class of a lot of exciting prospects. I don't know if there's any stars, but certainly a lot of exciting prospects.
What has been the most crazy move to you? Because we've had a lot. Obviously Devontae Adams being one of the biggest ones. That one felt like it was out of nowhere, even though they apparently had this planned since the Aaron Rodgers move and all that stuff. Was that the craziest one, or do you have another one in mind?
I think it's the 2 receivers. It's Adams and Tyreek Hill, because I think, we all thought Rodgers back to the Packers. Okay, it's run it back because Devontae's going to stay as a guy in the franchise tag. And then, Tyreek Hill seemed as if, he was the cornerstone of their receiving core. And clearly, when he started to see these deals, and I think, we're certainly hearing the word this week with Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin and AJ Brown, they feel the same way. The money made things happen for Tyreek Hill. So those 2 moves are probably the most, startling, given the surprise nature of both of them.
Fitzy, you're enjoying the nice cold weather up in the Chicago area right now. You totally were not jealous by my 10-day forecast that I sent you at all the other day on Twitter. Is that the craziest move to you? One of the wide receiver ones, or is there a different one? Was Russell Wilson maybe a little bit crazier? What do you think?
No, I'm with Jamey on that one. I mean, the Wilson thing, not a shocker. Like, there had been talk about him leaving Seattle for a long time and not being totally content there. And Denver obviously didn't get Aaron Rodgers, so not surprised they made a different big move. Yeah, I think even Hill might be a little crazier than Adams. The Adams thing was maybe, I don't know if you could totally see it coming, but with the Packers so snug up against the salary cap and wanting to extend Rodgers, it made sense, I guess. But the Hill thing was pretty crazy. I didn't see that coming at all. That was totally out of left field.
It really was. So, look, with that, let's dive in here. We've got each of us have 5 players we want to buy low on in a dynasty league right now. Jamey, you are the guest. We're going to start with quarterback. So why don't you tell us which quarterback you would like to buy low on right now?
It's everybody's favorite quarterback, the one that we're always excited about and everybody wants on their fantasy team. And certainly the team that he plays for loves him to death, but it's Kirk Cousins. And, I think he obviously is limited as a quarterback. I think we all see that, but his opportunity, I think, is going to be maybe the best that he's had. And he's obviously been one of these guys that's kind of surprised us as a fantasy quarterback because we never really wanted to draft him in redraft and seasonal leagues. And, I think dynasty, managers kind of view him more as, okay, I'll start him if I have to. And then as the season goes on, you probably end up plugging him into your lineup more times than not. But I think the coaching change is huge for him. Mike Zimmer, if talk to people, I'm kind of lucky as a fantasy analyst. I get to go to a lot of NFL events. So I was at the owners' meetings. I got a chance to be around Kevin O'Connell. I was at the combine as well. Got to listen to him and speak to some people who cover the team and some sources with the Vikings, and just just the change in the building. I think you're going to see just a different Vikings offense mostly, but a Vikings team that's kind of got a new voice, a new head coach that's going to just change the tenor of what that, team looks like. And I think it's going to be good for Cousins and certainly good for Jefferson and Thielen if he stays healthy. And, another guy, I didn't put him on the list, but another good buy low candidate for me would be Irv Smith. I think coming off the injury is going to be huge for him, as long as he's 100% healthy, because, the loss of Tyler Conklin will be, a big factor there. But KJ Osborne, I think, is somebody you want to look at also. This is just going to be a better Vikings offense all around, so I like the outlook for Kirk Cousins. And obviously, again, the idea of Kirk Cousins and buying him in any capacity is usually something that people tend to, shy away from. So if he's on somebody's bench, I think it's a good guy to go pluck off the roster, and you can probably get it pretty cheap.
Yeah, and I remember reading that, really O'Connell got this job based on saying how he was going to win with Kirk Cousins. And we do have known Kirk Cousins hater, Pat Fitzmaurice, on this show here. So let's hear your thoughts about buying low on Kirk Cousins, Pat. And just to let you guys know, a couple guys, if you're looking for a 1-for-1 in a 1 QB league for Kirk Cousins, guys that are kind of in the trade chart around that same area would be like Russell Gage, Will Fuller, or Darrell Henderson, Sony Michel. Those are the guys that are kind of in that area, which seems like a pretty decent buy, Fitz. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And as far as the Kirk Cousins hate thing, I mean, I will concede that there is no better quarterback at getting you 10 yards on 3rd and 12 than Kirk Cousins. But I mean, seriously, I've got him on a dynasty roster in a league that I'm in with Jamey. So the hate can only be so strong. And I do agree with Jamie's take that the new regime is probably good for Cousins. Like, we think of Seattle as the franchise that is overly dedicated to the run to a fault. But Minnesota was kind of right there with Seattle during the last few years. And hopefully that changes with a new coach in the building.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins is a guy that, he can change how he's doing from one half to the other, let alone one season to the other and 1 week to the other. So I a little bit volatile, but I do like the buy low on him, especially with a new OC, getting some confidence going in this offense here from Minnesota. Pat, who is your QB that you would like to buy low on right now?
I mean, I can hardly make fun of Kirk Cousins when I'm going to name Daniel Jones here. So, first of all, we just, obviously his stock is completely beaten up right now. But the Giants did just pick up his 5th-year option. And I really think Brian Daboll is going to be good for him. I think he is going to cater to his strengths. There were stories about how immediately after being hired, Daboll contacted Jones and was like, what works for you? What sort of plays do you want to run? Like, go back to high school if you need to. Like, where do you think your strengths are? What are you really good at? What do you feel comfortable with? So hopefully that was sort of indicative of the coaching that we're going to get. And I do worry about going overboard with that. I kind of was a little higher on Sam Darnold than I should have been last year, going from, Adam Gase to what I thought was going to be a more nurturing situation. It just didn't pan out. So I could be making the same mistake, but I think we're going to see more RPOs. More 3 and 4 receiver sets, more catering to Jones's running ability, which we saw Daboll do with Josh Allen. And certainly, I don't think there's a Josh Allen type breakout looming here for Daniel Jones, but maybe he can be the dollar store Josh Allen, at least with the running, minus the rocket arm. So, if I could get Daniel Jones for pick 201 in Superflex or Tony Pollard or something like that, I think I'd take that chance.
Yeah, Jamey, I mean, all of the weapons are there for Daniel Jones to succeed. He's got good wide receivers. We're going to mention one of those a little bit later. Saquon Barkley is still one of my favorite running backs. And we saw Josh Allen have immense success for Buffalo. Do you think Danny Dimes can break through and have a successful season here under Daboll?
I do. I think, you've seen, it's been so unfortunate, when you talk about these young quarterbacks, and, you got to give the Giants some semblance of credit, even though you're giving it to Dave Gettleman. But, they tried last year with Kenny Golladay, and they've tried to, put pieces on the offensive line, and so it's not like they just left him out there without trying to, and Kadarius Toney with a first-round pick, so it's not like they haven't, tried to put pieces around him, but those guys just haven't stayed healthy. Barkley, we know the last, 2+ seasons, obviously, Toney last year, Golladay missing time. Maybe it's addition by subtraction by taking Evan Ingram and his drops off the field, and that could help Daniel Jones as well. There's only one way to go for him. And so I think, as Pat said, we know he can run. He certainly has that ability. They just haven't let him do it as much. And I'm sure part of the injuries have played a role in that. But I think, with the 2 picks, in the first round, if they're able to address the offensive line and get better up front, they have a better play caller. I agree. I do think that the coaching will matter here. And it would just help to have his weapons around him for, 13+ games. Let's just see what he could do with Toney and Golladay and Barkley in that group. And maybe Shepard's back, sooner than we thought. And so could be a very interesting offense, for a quarterback that at times we certainly saw it his rookie season that has plenty of promise.
Yeah, I'm in on a Danny Dimes buyback for sure. I hope he is successful. For me, I'm gonna go with Zach Wilson. He's currently on FantasyPros ECR and Dynasty QB 20. I have him at 17. He had the rough rookie season for sure, but he's gonna get Elijah Moore is going to be healthy. He only played 11 games last season, only started 6. Corey Davis only played 9 games. They signed CJ Uzomah. They have 7 picks in the first 4 rounds to add more receiving talent as well. And a lot of his success, Zach Wilson's success at BYU, was a good offensive line. The offensive line is solid in New York. They got Michael Carter. I think it's all about gelling and getting it back together. Fitz, do you think Zach Wilson could be successful in year 2, or is this looking more and more like a Sam Darnold situation to you every day?
I don't know, Boggs. I don't know. Like I'm still... Jury is very much out there.
Yeah.
Like I'm intrigued by him. I don't know. I'm hoping they draft another lineman to really bolster the protection. It would be nice if they added a receiver too. I'm still very agnostic on what Zach Wilson's potential is. I just like that. It's still an open question to me.
And some of the trade chart guys here that kind of line up points wise, right, with Zach Wilson or Melvin Gordon, Kenneth Gainwell, Tyler Boyd, Russell Gage, Irv Smith, Adam Troutman. So there's a couple of spots to potentially buy him, especially if you need a QB. Jamey, what do you think about Zach Wilson? Are you buying a bounce back, or are you legit concerned here?
I think I agree with Pat. It's kind of a little bit of an incomplete right now for Zach Wilson, because he didn't really get a lot of time with Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, as you alluded to. Both those guys missing time when Zach Wilson was healthy. And then, as we saw, when Wilson was out, especially Michael Carter, a lot of the other guys' numbers popped, whether it was Mike White throwing to Carter or it was Josh Johnson and the appearance that he had. So Zach Wilson, I think, has still a lot to show us. But again, kind of what I referenced what the Giants did. You see the Jets are going to try and do something. They swung and missed on Tyreek Hill, but they went after him. Obviously, he didn't want to go there. You're seeing all sorts of wide receivers being mocked to them at number 10. Drake London would be fun to see, to have another upgraded piece there. You mentioned they bring in the 2 tight ends, Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, so they're trying to upgrade that position as well. Both those guys can block, so that'll help the offensive line as well. Also, so there are nice pieces in place with one potentially coming, if not more. And so I do think there's certainly a much higher ceiling for him. But is his ceiling going to be, in the Baker Mayfield, Carson Wentz fantasy range, or is it going to be maybe a little bit higher than that? And so it's just a matter of, what you're spending to go get him. I do think that, again, there is going to be a second-year improvement. Health will matter. Better offensive line play will matter. Better weapons will matter. But if you don't have to spend too much, I do think that it is a good buy low candidate for sure.
All right, let's go to some running backs here, Jamey, and you are up first. Which running back do you want to buy low for Dynasty leagues right now?
Yeah, we'll just stick with the Jets and Michael Carter. Again, the situation sets up the fact that Tevin Coleman was the only free agent competition that they brought in, bringing him back. I think is a good sign, because I don't think he's more talented than what Michael Carter showed us. Unfortunately, he's tied to the coaching staff, from their time in San Francisco. So that's a little bit of a worry. But I do think that he's, Carter's going to prove to be better than Coleman once again. The difference will come is if they involve him in the passing game the way that the other quarterbacks did, aside from Zach Wilson. I think this is where Wilson's kind of, the push-pull of, you want the upside of him when he's throwing the ball down the field, but you obviously want to see, from what Michael Carter's standpoint is, will he have some of those dump-off passes and some of those easier throws that I think will help this Jets offense. So I'm still, hopeful of his role in the passing game being what we saw more to the Mike White, games, as opposed to the Zach Wilson games. And we did see when Wilson came back from the knee injury that he was incorporating that more into a little bit of his game, probably a little bit of a mantra from the coaching staff there. So the primary back on what an offense should be, taking a step in the right direction with better pieces around it. So if you can get Michael Carter cheap without sort of looking at where the highs were last year and sort of, push that fantasy manager selling to the lows and say, well, Zach Wilson wasn't good for him, what we're going to get in year two. Maybe you can get him cheap enough that he could still come back and return some significant value. I think he could be a weekly starter for you in the majority of leagues.
And it's crazy, Fitz, to think about how much we expected from Michael Carter in year one, and then he wasn't as good as we expected. So there's just not a lot of chatter about Michael Carter right now, which is, leads exactly to Jamey's point about potentially buying him low. And a couple of the guys just in his range in terms of our trade chart were Mooney, Tony, Allen, Brandon Ayuk. If you're looking for like a 1-for-1 wide receiver type of swap, what do you think about buying low on Carter right now?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think we both do, Boggs. We've talked about him before. And like, as Jamey said, give us more of the Mike White, Michael Carter, where he is catching like 7-8 passes a game. I mean, he was just PPR goodness during that little Mike White run we had last year. And that said, I will be holding my breath, probably especially on day 2 of the draft, hoping the Jets do not wind up with either Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker or, even maybe Isaiah Spiller, Brian Robinson. Like, hopefully the Jets do not get one of these top running backs to kind of threaten the Michael Carter potential.
I might like it if they get one of those guys and you can get Carter even cheaper after the draft. I think that might even lower him a little bit more. And Saleh coming over from San Francisco, they use multiple backs. So even if they get a guy, Carter's still going to be in line for some touches here. Fitz, who is your first running back that you want to buy low on?
All right, let's throw out the name A.J. Dillon. And we saw him out carry Aaron Jones down the stretch last year over the Packers' last 10 games. And now with the Adams trade that we were talking about earlier, we are going to see the Packers run at a higher percentage this year, and they're going to target their running backs in the passing game at a higher percentage. And that was sort of the code for Aaron Jones to go off whenever Davante Adams did not play. Aaron Jones usually had like a really spiked usage in the passing game. And I think we're going to see Jones be the primary beneficiary in the passing game, but maybe that means he shifts to more of a traditional passing down back, and we see an even greater percentage of the early down touches going to Dillon. So, and Dillon also showed that he's a pretty good pass catcher in his own right, even though that's something he was never asked to do at Boston College. Like, he was hyper efficient as a pass catcher for Green Bay last year and actually looked really good doing it, like occasionally, snagging throws outside the frame of his body. There's just a lot to like here. The big body, the cold weather team, the, emphasis on the run down the stretch for the Packers. In
no wide receivers at all. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
How dare you say that about Sammy Watkins?
So I think things set up pretty well for A.J. Dillon here, who's, given us a glimpse of some pretty considerable talent in his first couple of years here.
Jamey, what do you think about A.J. Dillon? Obviously a big bruising type of back. It fits it well, but Aaron Jones kind of in front of him here.
Yeah, I'm going to steal a line from Fitz from earlier when he talked about Josh Allen and Daniel Jones. I wouldn't be surprised if A.J. Dillon, once upon a time, if you recall, is a dollar store version of Derrick Henry, who had to sit behind DeMarco Murray when he first came into the NFL and then eventually took over, and we know what he became. I don't know how much longer Aaron Jones will be this, but I think, you've seen a little bit of the injury start to become a problem the last couple of years. And A.J. Dillon could be the guy that takes over some of the rushing down work, as you said. But maybe by next year as the primary back, if Aaron Jones just can't hold up, or the Packers, as we know, they tend to move on from guys when they get to a point where they're just not productive. So the contract may be a problem for the Packers and Aaron Jones. They might just have to cut bait. And we could see A.J. Dillon, maybe not the star fantasy running back in 2022, but by 2023, he could be that guy. So you're trying to get ahead of it, certainly by maybe a year while he's still productive in this campaign. Everything that Pat said makes a ton of sense. And so the question will become, how much more does he get involved in the passing game? But I do think he's going to be much more involved in the ground game. The flip side of that, though, I guess the counter would be, is the offense going to be as good because of the way the receiving core sort of shakes up right now? Will they score as many points? Will they move the ball as successfully? Obviously, we're banking on Aaron Rodgers being an MVP once again, which I'm sure he still will be in that mix. But losing Davante Adams clearly is a blow to this offense. So we still have to see how they retool their receiving core. I don't think Sammy Watkins is the answer to their problems just yet. But if they do lean more toward the ground game, more incorporating both running backs, not just Aaron Jones in the passing game, A.J. Dillon is certainly somebody that is in that mix of, you could still put him in a buy low candidate. And if he does pop, not necessarily to the extent that I think he will this year, but maybe by next year, you'll be thrilled that you got him as cheap as you might be able to this season as opposed to next offseason.
Yeah, I think the Packers are still going to get rolling, and I wouldn't be surprised if they take a couple wide receivers very early in this draft. They got a lot of picks for Davante Adams, so they can absolutely invest. But I got a question for you guys before we move on and get to my guy. Are you a 1 in 100 investing genius? Good for you. Whatever you're doing with your trades, you've somehow found a way to beat the long-term performance of Wealthfront's automated investing portfolios. For the rest of us, 99%, don't skip this ad, because joining Wealthfront sounds like a pretty smart idea for you. The secret to Wealthfront's performance is great software. It's built to make it easy, rewarding, and yes, even delightful to build your long-term wealth. Wealthfront's automated trading optimizes your portfolio based on your own risk settings, helping you reach your financial goals without lifting a finger. They also get you automatic tax breaks that can boost your returns even when the market dips, kind of like a bonus coupon you can redeem at tax time. You can go with Wealthfront's expert-built portfolios, including a socially responsible option that is designed around sustainability, diversity, and equity. Or you can build your own portfolio with their curated selection of funds. Wealthfront is trusted with over $27 billion in assets, helping nearly 500,000 people build their wealth. And Investopedia just named them their best robo-advisor for 2022, and it's only April. Already won an award for the year. To check it out, go to wealthfront.com/fantasypros and get started today. For me, and my first running back here in buy low is, I'm going to get a guy near the top, J.K. Dobbins. He's currently RB number 15 in ECR for Dynasty. For me, he's 10. We haven't heard a lot of good news on Dobbins, which is why I think he'll be a good buy here. Harbaugh said he'll most likely open camp on the pup, but I think this is more due to the overall change in process for the Ravens after all of the injuries that they sustained last year. And let's not forget, this team runs a lot. They were only third last year, which was a disappointment because they were first in 2020 and first in 2019 in rush attempts. J.K. Dobbins is going to be the lead back. They still have Gus Edwards, who is also coming off an injury, and they haven't added anyone, which is kind of surprising because there are some decent RBs sitting out in the market right now, and they haven't added anyone. They could add someone through the draft, of course, but even if they do, this team runs more than anyone. So I'm buying low on J.K. Dobbins. I think he's still an RB1. Jamey, what do you think of Dobbins moving forward?
Yeah, I think the window is definitely open now before the draft, because you just had the Melvin Gordon rumor of, him visiting or talking to Baltimore. I think that was probably a little bit more for leverage. I would be surprised if the Ravens brought in somebody of his caliber, but I would not be surprised if they did go out and address the position in the draft. Like you said, the pup list, I think people hear that and they think it's the season pup list. It's the training camp pup list.
Right.
And so most likely they're going to, take their time and be cautious with him, because it wasn't just him. Like you mentioned, it was Gus Edwards and it was Justice Hill. They lost their top three guys. And so, we saw what happened with Tyson Williams and Devontae Freeman and Latavius Murray. They were just scrambling to fill that role, and it never really materialized to the level of what they're used to. So J.K. Dobbins, if it is somebody like a Melvin Gordon, clearly the 2022 campaign could be frustrating. But I still think, as you mentioned, he's so young. He's, I think he's still 23 years old. A guy that, or 24 years old, a guy that still has plenty of potential in this offense to be very successful for many, many years, as long as he stays there. And so if he doesn't live up to the expectations this year, while he'll still be good, again, by 2023, I don't think Melvin Gordon would be on the roster or somebody like that. So the concern would be more if they go out in the draft and they get Breece Hall or Ken Walker or one of those guys. Yeah. Then I think you got to be a little bit worried about not only the role for Dobbins, but the health for Dobbins, because I think that would be more telling if they do go out and spend, a day 2 pick on a running back. But, if it's just somebody that they're backfilling to get another third guy in there just in case, or maybe to replace Gus Edwards because he's not right. There's so many moving parts with this right now, but I do think the buy low window is right now before the NFL draft, because post NFL draft, if they don't add anybody, then you're not going to be able to get him as cheap as you might right now.
Fitzy, what do you think about going out and buying J.K. Dobbins now? Like Jamey mentioned, it's a little bit of a risk, but it could pay off pretty big if you do it right now.
Yeah, I mean, as Jamey mentioned, like that would be kind of an ominous harbinger if they did like take another running back in the first 2 days of the draft. What I think, though, like contributes to this sort of tepid sentiment towards Dobbins as much as the injury thing is that he has a limited pass catching upside. And we kind of know that the Ravens just don't really throw to their backs all that much. So like 50 catches, not a chance. 40 catches, probably not. But there's immense touchdown potential here. Just immense. Like he could be the Damian Harris who pops for 15 touchdowns in 2022. I don't think that would surprise anyone. So like I'm high on him. I agree completely. I'm not too worried about the injury thing unless we do see that day 2 pick. If we do get one of those top 2 or 3 running backs in Baltimore, that is going to be a little cause for sweaty palms, but otherwise I'm in.
And you know, the older Lamar gets, the less they're going to want him sticking his nose in at the goal line, and the more times he's going to be handing it off. So let's go to RB number 2 here. Jamey, who do you have for RB number 2 on our buy low here?
Yeah, this one might be a little bit obvious, but you know, Travis Etienne, I think, you know, is in a great spot. You know, I think this might be one you want to wait a little bit if you're looking to acquire him, because you want to wait until we get the James Robinson is on track for training camp report, you know, and then things get a little bit better for Travis Etienne. But I spoke to Doug Peterson at the owners meetings, you know, and he said that there's one coach that actually stayed on staff with him. I think only one, and it was Bernie Parmalee, the running backs coach. And, you know, he brought him up to say that his staff and Peterson himself liked what they were going to do with Etienne last year and the role that they were going to employ him, or how they're going to employ him and use him. I think he was speaking more as if Robinson was going to be there or some sort of, you know, complementary option. But the fact that they're going to use him in a variety of ways, I think they'll certainly throw the ball to him quite a bit. Obviously, the rapport with Trevor Lawrence and Etienne from their days in Clemson is going to matter. He was such a special talent at Clemson, you know, a do-it-all threat, as we all saw. You know, I think the foot injury seems like it's behind him. I like the fact that he was joking if there was a year to miss. It was certainly last year because of the Urban Meyer fiasco. So I think Doug Peterson, he's got 250 catch running backs on his resume, and Darren Sproles and Miles Sanders once upon a time. We know he was good with Jay Ajayi when he acquired him from Miami, you know, in their Super Bowl run. And so he's gotten good production out of his backfield. As long as Robinson is probably slow, this is a guy that's probably a candidate for the season pup list, so he can miss the first 6 games. So Travis Etienne's in a really good spot for a guy that, you know, came into the NFL with a lot of hype. Hopefully he can live up to it this season.
Pat, what do you think about buying on Travis Etienne? I'm totally in here. You know, James Robinson looks like he's going to be down. The whole Urban Meyer wanting to move him to wide receiver thing was just so laughable. Like, guy could probably play wide receiver, but you're not going to use his talent at wide out. He's not Tariq Cohen. So your thoughts on Travis Etienne and potentially buying him a little bit low right now?
Yep, really like the call. And like you, I did not want to see him in that pseudo Percy Harvin role that Urban Meyer was envisioning for him. I think it's a good thing that he's going to be used more conventionally, because he is, as Jamey said, in every down, like an all-purpose guy. He can do it all. Do it all back, I think is the phrase Jamey used. So I agree. And he is going to have a nice, wide, clear runway, I think, with the presumably slow recovery from Robinson from that injury. So like him a lot. And the fact that he's paired with Trevor Lawrence again can't hurt at all.
And I mean, you know, some of these guys right here, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, that's kind of the range that we're looking if you're looking for a 1-for-1 wide receiver deal. So I think those are some good names, especially if you can dump Cooper to get Etienne. I'm all about it. Pat, who is your RB number 2 here?
All right, so I found out recently just how much people hate Miles Sanders when I posted about a trade I made where I actually traded away Jonathan Taylor for Jalen Waddle, Miles Sanders, a 2023 first and a 2023 second. And, you know, if you want to say I came away light from that trade, that's fair. That's fine. But a lot of the reasoning I saw from the responses I got were Miles Sanders sucks. And
well, Miles Sanders in that deal is kind of the throw, and you're getting the first and the wideout and the second. Like Miles Sanders is kind of the cherry on top here.
Exactly, and you wouldn't believe how many people pinpointed Miles Sanders as the reason they hated that deal. And I think he's a buying opportunity as sort of the anti-Damian Harris last year with 0 touchdowns in his 12 games, and just kind of a fluky thing that he did not punch it into the end zone. I mean, he averaged 5.5 yards a carry, and I know yards per carry is not a great stat, but he's averaged 5.1 for his career. And last year, he was actually 5th in breakaway run percentage among backs with at least 70 carries, trailing only Rashad Penny, Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, and Nick Chubb. Pretty good company there. Graded out well per PFF, 32nd in rushing and 22nd receiving among running backs. I don't know if I believe the receiving grade because he averaged like 4.6 yards per target, which is pretty terrible. But they're not. Jordan Howard is still a free agent. They do still have Boston Scott. They do have Kenneth Gainwell, but we have seen that Philadelphia is going to run the ball. Maybe not to the extreme that they did last year when down the stretch they were running at like 64% of the time, basically like a college team. But they are going to run a lot. And after Miles Sanders missed time midseason last year, he came back and had 16 or more carries in 3 of his next 4 games. Even if they use a committee, he's going to get a lot of work in that committee. So, and as down as people are, like you could get him for an early 2nd rounder in a super flex league, maybe for like a Tyler Lockett whose stock is kind of beaten up with the quarterback difficulties in Seattle, a Marquise Brown who, maybe some people like more than I do. So, I mean, I think it's a good time to get him and to test the waters with the Miles Sanders stakeholder in your league and see whether he wants out. He or she wants out.
And I think this is a perfect example. You throw out this trade that you do with the obvious big pieces, Waddle, and a first. You're trading the number 1 running back in the league. We get it. But the hate for Miles Sanders shows the public sentiment for him right now. So Jamey, what do you think about potentially buying on Miles Sanders right now? Because it seems like you can get him really cheap, probably cheaper than even our trade chart has him if Twitter is to be believed, but I mean, who really believes Twitter, of course?
It's my favorite name that we've thrown out so far. I think, as long as there's not another guy brought in, because that I think is the key to it, because Boston Scott, I don't think is a threat. And I don't think Kenneth Gainwell is a threat to his every down rushing work. I think he's more of a threat to his passing down work. But as we saw, and as we know with mobile quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, they're not going to necessarily feature a guy in the ground game because he's going to look to run more than he's going to look to, throw the ball to his backs as a safety valve. So, Sanders may not get back to that 50 catch level, but I think 40 catches is certainly on the table. I think you're right. The touchdowns are going to bounce back, I hope in a big way, to where we're talking about a double-digit touchdown scorer. But this offense is probably going to look similar to what was successful for them last year. They'll probably bring in another receiver, at least hopefully that would be the case, and there's some talk about maybe, teams interested in Jalen Reagor, so they might have to, do it by necessity, but they'll throw the ball better than they did last year toward the end of the season. But I think Nick Sirianni kind of figured out the formula for his team, and Miles Sanders should be the catalyst of this ground game. So there's a lot to like about his situation. There's a lot to like about the lack of competition, at least as of now. And so biggest thing for him is just stay healthy. If he can avoid those injuries, and then he's in line for what should be an amazing season, and for redraft purposes could be an unbelievable value as well, because I think he's going to get drafted outside the starting group, which I think is a mistake.
And that's exactly the point here, is he is a perfect flex option or RB2 option, because you have your good grinding starter that's going to get a lot of touches, and then you have the explosiveness of Miles Sanders, which is going to be make or break. Perfect as a flex, and still in a deeper league, still viable as an RB2 as well. Before I give you mine, I got to tell you guys about Reality Sports Online. And by now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just takes a little more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the perfect platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. I'm going to stay at the top of the RBs here, and I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs. And this is a name you're going to hear from me for probably up until the season, because he's currently, in terms of Dynasty, RB 18. For me, he's 13. Last year, RB 12 overall in total points. 2020, RB 8. 2019, he's RB 21 when he missed 3 games. In terms of points per game, last season, he was 14. 2020, he was 14. 2019, he was 16. So he has been at least an RB2 every single year. Every single year, he has been an RB2. And he caught a career high. He had a career high 64 targets last year. The Raiders brought in Brandon Bolden and Amir Abdullah. These aren't big threats. Kenyon Drake went down injured, but he's still on the roster. They don't have much draft capital to spend on RBs this year. They have 2 picks in the first 4 rounds because of that trade for Davante Adams. So there's not a lot of wiggle room for them to make a deal for a running back. And I don't think any of these guys currently on the roster will threaten him. I think he's still going to be a very big workhorse for the Raiders, and their offense should be improved with the addition of Davante Adams. So, Jamey, what do you think about potentially buying Jacobs? This isn't a huge buy low, but you're probably going to get him for less than he'll be worth right now if you go out and try to buy on him.
It's a perfect dynasty move for a contender versus a team that's selling, because obviously Josh Jacobs is not necessarily going to, I think by 2023, 2024, depending on when you think your rebuild is complete, is the type of guy that you're going to get maximum value for. Whereas right now you might, because of everything you just laid out. So the offense is definitely going to be better. He's typically been better when the Raiders are winning versus the Raiders are losing. His numbers, the splits between the wins and losses are dramatic for him. And so better team, so hopefully he's going to be in a better spot. The passing game work is really where I just don't know what to make of Josh Jacobs, because like you said, last year was great for him, but the majority of his receptions came when Drake and Darren Waller were not there. And so now you not only have both those guys back, but you have Davante Adams on the field. And Josh McDaniels, if he's going to stick with the same sort of track record that he had in New England, he's probably going to use the passing downs back, because he's liked to use that more so with Tom Brady than he did with Mac Jones. But I think that was a byproduct of James White going down. So will it be Drake? Will it be Bolden? Will it be Abdullah? Who knows? I don't think they're bringing anybody else in. I'd love for it to still be Jacobs, but I think just the overall numbers will be better for him. This is another guy that could be in the race for leading the league in touchdowns, just this team being better and the fact that he's going to work at the goal line. So I would say he's a 10 touchdown guy. He's a candidate for 1,500 total yards easy. And so, yes, if you can acquire him, especially if you're looking at it for a team that's in a rebuild mode, you might have to pay up a little bit more than you want to because of the past history of his production. But I agree. I do think the best of Josh Jacobs is yet to come. What do you think, Fitz? You in on Josh Jacobs as a buy also?
I think so. The expulsion of John Gruden was so good for his value last year as far as spiking that target total. But as Jamey noted, there were sort of mitigating circumstances with the Waller injury, a spillover of targets to Hunter Renfrow and Josh Jacobs, because, Brian Edwards and Zay Jones were not going to get a large portion of that spillover. So, but now with Davante Adams, a healthy Waller, remains to be seen if he's going to get that sort of usage in the passing game again. So tentatively excited, and I think we have to be optimistic about the touchdown potential now that offense should be a lot better with Davante Adams there.
And let's talk about some wideouts here. Jamey, who do you have for your first buy low wide receiver target?
Yeah, this one it's interesting for me because I'm not even sold on it myself, mostly because of his quarterback. But it's Terry McLaurin, just because I believe in his talent so much. I'm really curious to see what Washington does in the draft about the quarterback position. Are they going to, just say Carson Wentz is our guy because we gave up 2 second-round picks for him, or if they get, the guy that they might be targeting, whether it's, a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett or whoever, if they trade down, from 11 and maybe get somebody a little bit later in the draft or even a day 2 quarterback. So McLaurin, is kind of, I think, made his stand. He wants to be paid. Will Washington budge and pay him? If not, maybe he's out the door next season and ends up in a better spot because he is still young. He's still got, again, so much talent. And so he succeeded despite his quarterback play over the first 3 seasons of his career. Last year was the worst year of his performance, and hopefully Carson Wentz is better than Taylor Heineke. I think we were all hoping to see Ryan Fitzpatrick, knowing what Fitzpatrick has done for his number 1 receivers. That didn't materialize because of the hip injury to the quarterback. So hopefully Wentz can at least get a Michael Pittman type of season out of Terry McLaurin. I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. But maybe even we get the Case Keenum type of performance from McLaurin's standpoint, what we saw from him earlier in his career. So I think people are obviously down on him, McLaurin, because of the failures from a year ago, and knowing that Carson Wentz isn't the best quarterback upgrade that maybe Washington even could have had this offseason. So if you can get him cheap enough, I think he's a guy you want to acquire, because I still think the best of Terry McLaurin is going to be in front of us, if not 2022, maybe 2023 and beyond.
Fitz, this is a tricky one, because I completely agree. And it's interesting to see a guy like Terry McLaurin play with some bad QBs and still have success. You start to think of, well, what happened when DeAndre Hopkins got a good QB, right? And he was one of the league leaders. This is exactly the kind of thing that could happen for Terry McLaurin. But if you look at the trade chart, still kind of expensive. He's costing a guy like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones. But these are running backs that are a little bit longer in the tooth. We know that the wide receivers obviously last much longer because of the brutality of the RB position. If you're looking for a 1-for-1 deal from a different position, he is kind of costly because RBs are hard to replace, but he's going to last so much longer. And we have definitely not seen the best of Terry McLaurin yet. So what do you think about potentially going out and buying him low?
Yeah, so I'm conflicted here for the reasons we've talked about, the mitigating circumstances with his supporting cast. And like Jamey, I love the player himself. I think he's fantastic. Not excited to see them go with Wentz. Not excited about the possibility that they might be going with a wide receiver at number 11, I think is where they're picking. I mean, that's certainly on the table for them. But I mean, it is the quarterback situation that is potentially prying open this buy low window. So Jamey is spot on with that. And above all else, I try to, value players based on their talent and sort of minimize the supporting cast, especially in Dynasty where things can change pretty quickly. So I do agree in principle, get this talented guy who is probably as cheap as he is ever going to be.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we have these buy lows. There's always a situation where you can buy a guy low. Fitz, who's your first wide receiver you want to talk about buying low on?
So the first rule of investigative journalism, Bogman, is to follow the money. And in this case, follow the big money with Christian Kirk. And it's easy to follow the money with Christian Kirk because it's pretty much falling out of his pockets wherever he walks.
Yeah, just walk behind him.
Exactly. And I feel like the Jaguars are destined to make him their primary slot guy and sort of, put Laviska Shenault out of his misery there. Not that I've totally given up on Shenault, but even though Kirk has inside-outside versatility, I would love to see him be the full-time slot guy for Trevor Lawrence. So I just think the Jaguars offense is going to be better after the Urban Meyer clown show. Kirk's still only 25 and has been pretty good. I mean, he had a career-high 9.5 yards per target last year. There's a lot of potential here. And, I do think we're going to see better things from Trevor Lawrence in year 2. I think it's a good time to buy in Kirk, who surprisingly, at least according to our Dynasty trade value chart, I think the market is a little tepid on him right now. So, I mean, if you can get him for maybe a late first rounder in rookie drafts, a veteran running back, I think it's a good time to buy in on him.
This is the first one that makes me a little nervous, I think. Okay. But of course, Jamey, you can see in my background, I'm a Texas fan. I'm not going to be talking up too many Aggies here with Christian Kirk. But also, Kirk just kind of seemed like he was always third fiddle in Arizona. But Fitz has got the point. They gave him the money. If you look at money and targets, he should get 150 targets this year in this offense. And we, even with improvements and having high draft picks and all that stuff, Jaguars probably still going to be down in a lot of games and playing catch up. So the opportunity is absolutely there. Are you in on buying Christian Kirk low right now, or are you think you're going to stay away?
I don't know if I'd spend a first round pick on Christian Kirk, but I'd be looking to acquire him for sure, because I mean, the path to success is there. We all expect Trevor Lawrence to be better, whether it's just his talent, overcoming the situation, or just, again, as the situation has shown us, to be better with Doug Peterson taking over there. The receiving core clearly needed an upgrade, and they went out and they addressed it. And I think a lot of people look at the money, and we know obviously we'll make jokes about it, but you have to overpay to get guys to go to Jacksonville. And so, if he was going to get 13 to 15, it probably takes 15 to 17 to get him to a place like that. And so is he the ideal number one alpha receiver that's getting paid that way? No, I think we all agree on that. But is he the path to 150 targets? Probably so, because this receiving core needed it. And so they bring in Evan Ingram, they bring in Zay Jones, they're going to get Travis Etienne back. So everything almost is changing for Jacksonville. The biggest change has to be, can Christian Kirk handle being the guy that's going to see, the better competition from a cornerback standpoint? I think that's probably safe, especially if he's lining up in the slot more times than not. But can he handle the pressure of living up to that contract, which we know the expectations are not high? But more importantly, can Trevor Lawrence live up to the expectations of being the number one overall pick and playing like the guy everybody anointed as the next great superstar to enter the NFL, which clearly he was a flop as a rookie. So the offensive line is already better with Brandon Scherf there. The coaching staff is better. So Christian Kirk's in an ideal spot to outperform everything that he's ever done. People look at him and say he's never had 1,000-yard season. He's never done this. Well, clearly now that's his chance. It's his playing field to take advantage of. So for a high second round pick, I probably would be buying in. A first round pick, I don't know how he's going to compare to some of the guys that we'll see at the end of the first round of a rookie draft, but he's in that mix for sure. And so we're probably splitting hairs a little bit, but I don't know if I want to overpay for Christian Kirk, but if somebody that's a non-contending team is looking to sell him to a contender, I think that's a good buy for that contending team.
I'm not buying the Aggie, but I understand the logic. It's there for sure. For me, this is my favorite one, and this is why we do stuff like this. For me, it's Juju Smith-Schuster, currently wide receiver number 35 in ECR. He's my 19. I know a lot of people don't see it this way. I get it. And the criticism that we've heard about Juju is that as soon as AB left, Juju fell off, which is true. But let's not forget what Juju was dealing with, right? In 2019, it's Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. It's the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger the last couple seasons. And he was hurt last year. So add all this up, he's still, I believe, 16 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He's a very, very young wide receiver that has been in the league for a very long time. And now he plays with one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Patrick Mahomes. And if you're worried about Juju and AB and saying, well, you have to have another big target next to him, Travis Kelce's still there, guys. And they're probably going to draft someone big in the first round. So there's going to be other cross traffic that will leave Juju in one-on-one. Patrick Mahomes is an expert at getting the ball to guys in tight spaces. I just think this is going to add up to a great year. He's also on a contract because he's playing on a one-year deal to get himself some money after the season. So I just think everything is adding up here for Juju. Fitz, we'll start with you on this one. Are you in on buying Juju with me, or are you concerned about the last couple seasons of what we've seen from him?
No, I'm with you, and hopefully you can still buy low because no one has had a better change of ecosystems, I think, this offseason than Juju. I mean, going from, as you mentioned, like the quarterbacking that he was dealing with in Pittsburgh. I don't know if Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges were upgrades over Roethlisberger at that point. And now he's getting passes from Patrick Mahomes. And if defenses now think the way to beat Mahomes is by playing this two deep safety look all the time, I mean, that's going to play into Juju's hands. Like he is underneath, short area, intermediate parts of the field. So yeah, he's not the number one receiver. I mean, we know that's still Kelce, even if he's technically a tight end. But this is just such a good setup for Juju. And a guy who produced those sorts of numbers. I know it helped to have Antonio Brown there, but to put up the kind of prolific numbers he did at this young age, like that precocious production in his very early 20s, there's just no way that Juju sucks. Like there were mitigating circumstances. Right. There was a reason why he was struggling the last couple of years, and it wasn't him. It was the supporting cast.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big part of it. And look, the trade chart, because he's wide receiver 35 is pretty low. It's guys like Rashad Penny, who hasn't had a full season ever. James Conner, who is injury prone. Chase Edmonds, who's now in a share in Miami. So these are the names that you could potentially flip to get a guy like Juju who has high upside. Jamey, are you with us on the Juju train, or are you kind of staying away from it?
No, I totally agree. I think, Pat kind of hit on something there, though, just in terms of the window to buy low, because I think the Juju manager looks at it and says, well, why am I giving up on him now?
Right.
And again, he is still young. He's in this situation. The other side of it would be, how many receivers do they add? Is it just one in the first round, or do they, look at it and say, okay, we really have to restock the barrel restock the cupboard because we not only lose Tyreek Hill,
Sammy
Byron Pringle from a depth standpoint is gone. So do we have to just bring in more bodies and youth, and Mecole Hardman's not the answer as well. And so and is Juju out the door after the season? So they might be looking at it as they have to really bring in some more bodies there. But I think if they don't, and it's Juju, Hardman, MVS, and a rookie, you're buying on Juju's, history and still youth. I think he's only 25. So there's just so much to love about the situation. So hopefully you still get him cheap enough. Whereas, you're not just, overpaying for a guy that may not live up to the heights that you even have for him yourself.
Yeah, and look, I almost put Hardman on this, but they draft two wide receivers like you mentioned, and now Hardman is, nothing. He may end up on a different team. Who knows after this year? So I wanted to put Hardman on here because I do believe in him, but I just I don't have the stones to do it before the draft. That's all I'm saying. So who is your last wide receiver that you have here to give us a buy low for, Jamey?
It's Rondale Moore. Looking at the Christian Kirk departure, I think it's a great situation for him. I spoke to Cliff Kingsbury at the owners' meetings. He said this is a guy we should have got in the field a little bit more last year. Obviously a little tough with, Green and Hopkins and Kirk, but, he mentioned using him in the Deebo Samuel role. So I think Rondale Moore could really have a, just not a breakout season, but certainly a much better second season. And I think the perception of him is obviously very low for his minimal production that he had. So we saw, he had a couple high games in terms of target spikes, but never really materialized over a full season. They can use him in the backfield, so I like the setup for Rondale Moore quite a bit.
Yeah, this Cliff Kingsbury offense is going to be very, very interesting. Obviously, hopefully we don't get any, we talked about how crazy this offseason has been. Hopefully we don't get any other nuttiness with potentially Kyler Murray getting flipped during the draft because of all of his unfollowing of the social media and all that nonsense, which, we all hate that is news, but of course it is news now. But Rondale Moore, I like as a buy for sure. Fitz, if I'm not mistaken, you are a Rondale Moore guy, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, up here in Big Ten country. I mean, I fell in love with him in 2018 when he laid waste to Ohio State pretty much single-handedly. So really exciting, man. And the thing that bothers me, I feel like there is sneaky Steve Smith potential here. He totally reminds me of him, the size, the speed, the competitiveness, the toughness. I mean, Rondale Moore can squat a Mack truck, basically. And he is just this little keg of dynamite. But, I didn't love his usage in the horizontal passing attack of Cliff Kingsbury. And I actually thought he might fit real well into that. But his average depth of target last year was 1.4 yards. And Jamey mentioned the possibility that he's used in the Deebo Samuel role. That could be a good thing, but I don't want it to be 2020 Deebo Samuel, where right. Deebo's A-dot that year was 2.2 yards, I think. So, I want to see more of a traditional slot role for Rondale. And I'm kind of hoping that, as Jamey mentioned, Christian Kirk's departure opens that up. I'm going to be a little worried if we see the Cardinals draft either, a pure slot receiver, like a Sky Moore type or something, or a guy who could maybe be used as a big slot like Treylon Burks. So I'm going to be really interested to see what the Cardinals do at the receiver position. If there are no obvious threats to Rondale, then absolutely wheels up. I mean, I love the player. I just don't know if I trust Cliff Kingsbury to get the most out of him.
Well, Cliff Kingsbury definitely won't get the most of his timeouts. We know that for sure. But hopefully he, being an offensive guru that he is, he can do that. But because of his offensive, one-track mind, I worry that they'll take a wide receiver. But I think Rondale Moore is going to be great, even if they do add one. So who's the last guy you're buying on the cheap right now, Fitzy? Who you got?
Marquez Callaway. And I think you can get him for pocket change, like for a Dearness Johnson type, or some CJ Uzomah type, maybe a little
last round rookie pick. Yeah, you could probably snag him for very cheap. Yeah, I like this call.
And he might get even cheaper if the Saints do take Chris Olave or someone else from the front line of this receiver class. And I just think that the speed is going to play with Jameis Winston. Like, Callaway, good size, 6'2", 204, and this dude can fly. And he had 6 touchdowns last year, and 3 of them came in the first 5 weeks before Jameis got hurt. Then it's kind of easy to see why things didn't, really pop for Callaway the rest of the way with Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill at quarterback. So, average depth of target of 12.3 yards last year. This guy's a home run hitter, 15.2 yards per catch. I just like the talent here. I'm willing to bet on it, even if they add someone to this wide receiver room, even with Michael Thomas coming back. Like, Callaway just turned 24. Like, there is still time, even if it doesn't happen in 2022. Like, I like this guy's future.
Callaway's a burner, Jamey. What do you think about potentially adding him? And I think the big part here is what Fitz just mentioned. You can get him for pretty much nothing right now. So if you think there's even a glimmer of hope on this guy, you need to go get him, right?
Totally agree. You're looking at a guy that wasn't ready to be the one, and he was forced into that role because of Michael Thomas' absence. And so I think Thomas back, I think even if it's, another, guy like you mentioned, a frontline wide receiver with the 2 picks on that they have in the first round, he still be on the field quite a bit. He's a big target, and there's also, we really think, that Pete Carmichael is going to run the same offense that Sean Payton ran, but, he may have his own little wrinkles that he decides to do. There's also the looming possibility of a suspension for Alvin Kamara, and Mora's put on the passing game in the quarterback, because of what happened to Kamara following the Pro Bowl. So if that happens, and they don't really have the same type of running game, or certainly the same type of pass catcher at the backfield that Kamara brings for whatever amount of games Kamara might miss, more targets, to the wide receiver core there. So I agree. This is a guy that you might be able to get for, depending how deep your draft is, around 3 to 5 pick on a rookie only draft. And the later the better, because, this offense, I think, will still be good enough.
The last guy that I've got for you guys, and this is, I don't know, I feel like it's a buy low, but maybe it's not. Kadarius Toney for the New York Giants. He's wide receiver number 40 in ECR. I've got him as a wide receiver 3 at number 34. He was a first-round pick last year. The Giants will be installing the new offense. A lot of the stuff that we just talked about with Daniel Jones applies to Kadarius Toney too. And I mean, just look at what Dable and the staff did with Diggs and Gabriel Davis. Toney showed flashes last year against Dallas in week 5, 13 targets, 10 catches, 189 yards. He had a 12-target week against Tampa Bay in week 10 before his injury. Missed 7 games with oblique shoulder. He had COVID as well. And just looking at the trade chart, it's guys like Miles Sanders, Tony Pollard, Eli Mitchell, Damian Harris. So if you're RB heavy and you need a wide receiver, I think Kadarius Toney is going to be a guy. And Jamey, you're the Florida man here. So what do you think about Kadarius Toney and his potential in this New York Giants offense?
Yeah, I totally agree. You're talking to a Gator, so he's the guy that I've watched quite a bit. I hope he can stay healthy. That seems to be a little bit of a concern right now. I do think the coaching staff is going to, unleash him and hopefully feature him. It's such a fascinating offense, as we talked about earlier, because, these guys were never really healthy at the same time, with Golladay and Jones and Barkley and Toney as well. And so as long as Shepard, I think, stays out and he could sort of live in the slot, which I kind of think is where they would have envisioned him last year as well under that coaching staff, he's got a huge opportunity in front of him. So they'll be creative with him, bubble screens and, all the jet sweeps and all the opportunities to put the ball in his hands that way. But he's got to prove that he can be a legitimate wide receiver. So they'll move him inside, they'll move him outside. I do think that Daboll's, creativity will certainly help him. But as long as he just stays on the field, you're banking on a first-round talent that is, just electric with the ball in his hands. So If you don't have to overpay for Kadarius Toney, it's a perfect buy low candidate because there's still so much upside based on the limited glimpse that he showed us last season.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to have many an article of who's the next Deebo Samuel. And a couple guys we've mentioned here could be Rondale Moore, could be Kadarius Toney, could be this year. I don't know if anyone has the same unbelievable type of running ability that Deebo has, but Toney is one of those guys that could be used in multiple sets.
I'll take the next Cordero Patterson if that's what he can become too.
Sure. Yeah. You know, not as late in his career, but yeah, absolutely. What do you think about Toney moving forward, Fitzy?
Jamey said it. I mean, it's just we're hoping that this guy is not the next chronically injured player because it wasn't just one injury that was plaguing him late last season. It was like 6 different things. It was like every body part on this guy broke down at some point late in the year. And I think he had COVID too. Like just anything that could take this guy out of action was doing it. To his credit, he was at least trying to come back. Like he was still playing through some of it. But that 2-week stretch we saw, weeks 4 and week 5, if memory serves, like when he had so many targets and just like he looked so good, so explosive. I mean, he is just a freaky athlete. And if Dable can fully leverage that, if he can stay fully healthy, I think we're going to see pretty big things from him. And like there is superstar potential. We saw that in weeks 4 and 5 last year.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. Well, look, that's going to wrap it up for us. Jamey, you can follow him on Twitter at Jamey Eisenberg from CBS. What do you guys have coming up?
Just getting ready for the draft. We have our podcast, which you can find, on YouTube, wherever podcasts are available, our Fantasy Football Today podcast. And you can check us out, CBS Sports HQ. It's our 24-hour streaming network, but just getting ready for the NFL draft. I think like everybody else, it's, like you said, it feels like it's still, 3 weeks to a month away, but it's just next week. So it's going to have a lot of impacts, a lot of implications on a lot of the things we've been talking about even today. So it's going to be fun to get past that and see how all these rosters look like.
And Fitzy, what do you got coming up here?
Same here, Boggs. The draft prep at Fantasy Pros continues. We're going to be adding to our Dynasty draft kit, and we're going to be prepping for our best ball draft kits after the NFL draft. So getting excited. Great time of year.
Lots of work to be done. The draft is going to be a ton of fun next week. We're going to have all kinds of coverage. Of course, you can check out Jamey, like I said, at Jamey Eisenberg, at Bogman Sports for myself, at Fitz_FF for Fitzy. And we will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.